those of you who don't know us, KLOVE is known also as the Educational Media Foundation, and we are the largest Christian music broadcaster in the world with both KLOVE and Air One Radio. But in addition to that, we also have recently acquired some Spanish radio stations with Radio Nueva Vida, and then we're also known for many other media platforms. So in addition to radio, we have reached into publishing. We publish books as well as films, direct. We do a lot of direct streaming. We're doing that today, as you know. And then we're also very involved with podcasts. We have Access More that is doing a phenomenal job. We have a great team that is bringing that to fruition. It's been going for a few years, and we have great hopes for that. I'm going to invite Emil Kalina, who I mentioned earlier, to the stage and to the microphone. And he's going to share with us just a little bit and introduce Russell. They've been friends for a long time, so I thought he might have something to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Well, it's Russell says you can't see anything when you're standing here, and I can't. Thanks for coming back. I think you'll enjoy the afternoon session. There will be 2 parts to it, apparently, I'm told, and Russell is going to tell us how you implement the concepts that he taught us earlier today. So here's Russell.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you. All right, well, thanks for coming back. Wow, I was excited. I figured everybody would run for the hills after that, but glad to see some folks that coming back. So actually what we're going to talk about now, we've sort of looked at that overview from Scripture, and if you want a deeper dive into that, well, I got 500 pages worth of that deeper dive, and actually 2 books of 500 pages, so it depends on if you want the practical how to do it or the deep dive technical commentary. Got both of those for you. But now we're actually going to look at, hey, how do I actually do this, right? I've got a donor meeting tomorrow. What does all this mean for how I put it into practice? So we're going to look at a practical step-by-step guide of what to say. And I'm actually going to be borrowing phrases from some of the most effective major gifts fundraisers that they often use. And in many cases, they're using these processes because they work, not because that, oh, well, they have a scriptural background or See, the reality is that when we look at these things, and of course we're going to look at some, statistics, and we'll look at what the best fundraisers do and all of that. And I was sharing one of these presentations with a group of Christian fundraisers once, and a lady said, "Well, you work at a state university. How can you teach this stuff?" And here's my response. I said, "Well, it turns out that the Bible is true. And because it's true, we can observe that truth in a number of different ways, experimentally with what works and showing the impact of all of these strategies." So we're going to get super practical. But first, I think it's always important that we start with the end in mind. What is the goal of this ministry? What is the goal of your job? Now, we have this modern English term, actually it only came about around the 1900s, of fundraiser. That's fund is money, and raiser is the person who goes and gets the money. So fundraiser basically is money getter. That's what I do, I'm the money getter. That view is common, but it's not scriptural, and it's kind of destructive. Look, every occupation gets money. A doctor, a lawyer, a drug dealer, a prostitute, a farmer, they all get money, but that says nothing about the work itself. To do the right work, we've got to have the right goal. So, let me start with this. Does God want giving? I'm going to say the answer is the favorite lawyer answer, which is, it depends. God wants only a specific kind of giving. God wants joyful giving. This phrase for enjoyment that we just looked at in the 1 Timothy 6 passage, this is not normal enjoyment. This is hyper extreme enjoyment. In fact, it's only used one other place in all of Scripture. This is party time enjoyment, folks. It's used in Hebrews 11:25, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy, apolison, the passing pleasures of sin. Or having the good time, apolison, that sin could bring for a little while. It's that level of party time enjoyment, but it's not sinful. That's a pretty cool offer to be able to make to people. We see the same thing throughout Scripture. 2 Corinthians 9:7, God loves a joyful giver. Actually, that word is hilaron, for a hilariously joyful giver. We see in Acts 20:35, quoting Jesus, talking about giving as being happy or blessed. When Paul describes it in 2 Corinthians 9:8, he's talking about super, hyper contentment. Not just normal contentment, it's in all ways, in all forms. It is extreme sort of contentment. And also we see in 2 Corinthians 8:2 that the donors that he uses as his donor example, notice how they're giving. They are overflowing from the abundance of joy. God wants joyful giving. And in particular, he wants joyful giving from the heart. Of course, we see the same concept in 2 Corinthians 9, that, hey, everybody do what he's decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful, hilaron giver. And this is not a new concept, right? We see it back in Exodus 25:2. Was there a command to give to the tabernacle? Actually, just from everyone whose heart moves him, you'll take a contribution. Or take from among you a contribution to the Lord. Whoever is of a willing heart is to bring it as the Lord's contribution. When they had the capital campaign, celebration for the temple, some interesting words here. Then the people rejoiced because they had offered so willingly, for they had made their offer to the Lord wholeheartedly, and King David also rejoiced. The point is, this is joyful giving from the heart. It's the goal. It is where we're trying to get to. Here's something that you may not know. In the New Testament, the word that is usually translated as generous is apolotes. It actually doesn't mean big. We think of generous as big. This is a different word, and it's weird because this Greek word was never applied to giving before the outside of the New Testament. What does it mean? It means sincere, single-hearted, simple. It literally means unfolded. The is not plotes folded, not folded. It's what you see is what you get. In 2 Corinthians 6:18, donors are directed to be rich in good works. We've seen that. This word for good, kolos, means beautiful as an outward sign of the inward good, noble, honorable character. Good, worthy, honorable, noble, and seen to be so. That's the goal. To have joyful giving from the heart, meaning that it is an outward sign of the inward good. Now, I want to get a little offensive here. This isn't a them problem, meaning the donors. It's an us problem, meaning the fundraisers. God wants joyful giving from the heart. If this is not the goal of our fundraising, we're doing it wrong. Do you regularly consider what gift would be the most enjoyable for this donor? What gift would best express their personal identity, life story, or internal values or identity? You see, if we're asking those questions, it's because we're looking for joyful giving from the heart. That is an outward sign of their inward good, noble, honorable character. If we're not doing that, we can slip into just money getting. So let me be a little annoying and say, quit blaming the donors and start ministering to them. We see this a lot in Christian circles. The idea that, well, if only our donors were better people, then they would give more and they would enjoy it more too. Do any successful major gifts fundraising organizations start with that kind of an attitude? No. The right approach is, how can I provide joyful giving opportunities that reflect and grow the positive aspects of my donor's heart? The ministry process identifies those good, honorable, and noble features of a person's inward character, their identity. It then connects those identity characteristics with a beautiful, visible outward impact. That's the victory in the story. It uses that connection to motivate them to accept the challenge, to make this impact. So how do we get to joyful giving from the heart? As with any ministry, we start where they are. We start with the positive aspects of their heart. This is their character or identity from their values, their people, and their life story. We then help build a giving outcome or victory that is a joyful expression of their heart. Now, that giving process helps to grow those positive aspects of their character or identity. We then encourage them, that's the challenge, to make it happen. Let me give you some examples of what it looks like when we go through this process to encourage someone to take an action. Let me borrow from Paul. When Paul was trying to talk to the pagan Greek Areopagus, he had walked through, he had seen all of these statues of gods, and he was very troubled. But he didn't start out by attacking them. He started out with the positive aspects of their character. So Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I see that you are very religious in all respects. For while I was passing through and examining the objects of your worship, I also found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God. Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you.'" He's starting with the positive aspects of their identity, and he is explaining how it is those positive aspects that are going to motivate them to listen to what he has to say. He does it again when he's before King Agrippa. "King Agrippa, I consider myself fortunate that I am about to make my defense today before you, especially because you are an expert in all customs and questions among the Jews." We start with the positive aspects of the identity of the person. When he is in front of Felix, the governor of Judea, he starts out by saying, "Well, knowing that for many years you have been a judge to this nation, I cheerfully make my defense." We start with the positive aspects of the character of the person that will motivate them to accept the challenge that we're going to present. Well, of course, when he's writing to Timothy in his next letter, he starts with the positive aspects of Timothy's identity, in this case, pointing to his people, his family history. "For I am mindful of the sincere faith within you, your values, which first dwelled in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I am sure that it is in you as well," his family story. What's the process? We start with the positive aspects of their heart, character, or identity. In 1 Timothy 6:17, that's the message to the rich. We start with their identity, the social values. You are continuing in the ongoing process of being not high-minded, not separated from or above the fellowship community. That's why you're going to accept this challenge. We start with their identity from their life history values. You have already in the past not set your hope in the uncertainty or hiddenness of wealth, but on God. That's what they've done in the past. That's their life history. Also, their identity based upon gratitude and stewardship values. God is the one who richly supplies us with all things for enjoyment. So I want to suggest to you that we have these donor story steps in the passage that connects the prospective donor's identity, their people, values, and life story, with the motivating them to say yes to the challenge. That challenge has a promise. It is a promise that this challenge can lead to a victory. And that victory is personally meaningful because it connects back to the donor's people, values, and life story. So going through all of this, all you need to remember is 3 words: identity, challenge, victory. So the idea is, how can we walk the donor through this story of how their identity compels them to accept this challenge that will promise this victory, which is personally meaningful because of its connection to their identity? What we'll find is that this matches with many of the questions used by the most effective major gifts fundraisers. So let's take a look at some of that now. Let's look at a step-by-step menu of questions. Not because I'm going to tell you, here's the perfect question, but because I want you to find the questions that you would feel most comfortable having a conversation with a prospective donor about. So what fits your style to make this 3-part journey of identity connects to challenge, challenge promises a victory, the victory connects back to the donor's identity. Now, in the donor's journey, the fundraiser is, in story terms, the guiding sage. This is the guiding sage challenges with the choice. This happens at the ask. In movies, we see this in Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original Star Wars, or we see this in Morpheus in the original Matrix, or Gandalf the Grey in The Hobbit. This is the guiding sage who is going to make a challenge, to leave behind your ordinary, small, self-focused world and go on an adventure to make an impact in the larger world. That's the same concept we get in 1 Timothy 6:17. Parangele, para, come alongside with an authorized message. Now that is the guiding sage role. Professor Czeslaw Speak describes this word in the noun form, explaining that it can take on the mild sense of exhortation or counsel. We're coming alongside to counsel. Paul's fundraising in 1 Corinthians 8 starts with, I'm not saying this as a command, and it continues with, I give my opinion in this matter, for this is to your advantage. That's what Paul's fundraising looks like, coming alongside and giving an opinion that is for the advantage of the donor. I like one translation that puts this verse this way, but in this matter, I give you an opinion, for my doing this helps forward your own intentions. Notice that coming alongside. And what we're doing as fundraisers is helping to forward their own intentions. So that compelling challenge is going to go through these steps, connecting the donor's original identity, values, people, life story, promising the hope of victory that impacts the larger world, and delivering that enhanced identity, either internally, private meaning, or externally, public reputation. So the first link that we're trying to make here is between the donor's identity and the challenge. And that means we want the donor to think, I am the kind of person who makes gifts like this. I'm the kind of person who accepts challenges like this. Why? Well, maybe because of my people. People like me make gifts like this. Maybe because of my values. Giving to this cause or charity fits my values. Maybe because of my history. Giving to this cause or charity fits my life story. So why? Well, I'm in the in-progress, continuing process of being not high-minded, right? That's the values connection we see from the passage. Or the life story. I have already in the past, but with continuing effect on the present, placed my hope not in the uncertainty of hidden riches, but in God, who richly provides us with all things for enjoyment. That's the first step in the story process. Why am I the kind of person who makes gifts like this? Because of my people. This is, you've already placed your trust on God, who richly supplies us, everyone, with all things to enjoy, to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. People like us make gifts like this. We've all been supplied in different ways with different things, but we each use it in exactly the same way. We enjoy it. That's why God gave it to us, and this is how we do that, have that enjoyment. We also want to make that next connection that says this victory is personally meaningful to me. Why? Maybe because of my people. This impact helps or is supported by people like me. Because of my values make this impact meaningful to me. Because of my history, my life story makes this impact meaningful to me. We get the same thing in the passage. You want to be the kind of person who makes an impact like this. You get to be rich in beautiful, visible good works. You get to become a generous, joyful sharer of abundance. You get to become one who is a connected sharer with the fellowship community. You get to take hold of that which is truly life. And then the final step is that this gift is going to make this tangible impact. Now, notice in the passage, the idea here is you do good. This is using that word for intrinsic good combined with ergon, work. You become rich in ergois kolois. This is kalos, which is good, worthy, honorable, noble, and seen to be so. What work is the donor buying? Because that's the phrasing that is used in Scripture. How do you have the most fun, the most enjoyment, the most party time enjoyment with your wealth? Use it to buy work, to buy beautiful good work, to buy intrinsically good work. How do we share that story? In a way, we don't. We get the donor to share that story. We do it by asking questions. The one thing that is even more powerful than telling this story about the donor, getting the donor to tell this story about themselves. Somebody else, by the way, also liked to teach this way. I know it's called Socratic fundraising or Socratic questioning. That's sort of a pagan version of it, but here's all the times he does it just in the book of Matthew, right? Jesus loved answering questions to get people to think about, where are you going? What we want to do is to go through this cycle of eliciting the donor's people, family and affiliations, values, and history that connect in with generosity, with this impact, with a specific cause or organization, with the specific project or work within the organization. We then review and confirm each step in the cycle at the proposal, and then we can reference each step in the cycle at the ask. So it's a bit of a spiral conversation. The steps in this story, it's not just a one-shot deal. It's an ongoing, repeated, circular narrative. Socratic fundraising can progress from the general to the specific, from broad to narrow. How do we do this? We're going to justify asking questions, and then we're going to ask questions that help the donor to connect the donor's identity, life story, people, or values, to define a personally meaningful victory, and then we are going to present that challenge. How do we justify asking questions? There's a lot of different ways. It could be just a social motive. Hey, I'm interested in your story. Maybe it's an honor or impact motive. I need your help or advice. Or maybe it's a value motive. I can help or advise you. That's what I'm here for. Then we ask those questions by asking opening questions, follow-up questions, asking confirmation questions after a reflective statement to make sure that we got it right, and then we're going to spot solutions while repeating these steps. Keep in mind that you are the expert on your organization. So as we are eliciting these donor values and what is important to them and what would be a meaningful victory for them, we're always going to be thinking about, what projects at my organization should they be more connected to? What is the most joyful gift that this person could make given their background? And then ultimately, we're going to ask questions that make the challenge. Asking for permission to ask, connect the gift with that full story cycle, and ask for the gift. That's a whole lot of theory, and that's a whole lot of concept. Let's get super practical now, okay? We're actually going to look at 200 examples, and don't worry, I share all my stuff for free. You don't have to write all these things down. I share all my slides for free and everything else. And if you go on my website, encouragegenerosity.com, or just connect with me on LinkedIn, I share all this stuff for free. But I want you to get a feel for how these kinds of questions work and what works best for you as we run through these examples. But in these 200 examples of questions, don't miss the point. I'm not giving you just sales training here. This is about ministry to the donor. The goal is not to be the money getter. The goal is to open a ministry conversation with the donor. We want to help the donor discover their own most personally meaningful, enjoyable good works. Why? Because that's the goal. The goal is not to get donors, it's to get joyful donors. All right, let's jump into it. The first step is we need to elicit the donor's identity connections with the organization or the cause or perhaps generosity in general. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sharing phrases from some of the most effective fundraisers that they use in conversation, and then I'm going to be identifying which step in this process, this 3-word process, is happening with these questions. So we're going to start out with eliciting the donor's identity connections, and first we'll start with values, and then we'll move to people and life story. And also, since I am a researcher, all of these things have citations on them for the fundraisers that constructed the questions. What inspires you to give? What inspired you to make this gift? What inspired your first gift? Or people connections, the cause or charity people connections. Have others in your life been affected by this cause? Is there anyone in your family who also cared about this cause? How has this organization impacted your family or loved ones? Have any of your family members or close friends been involved with our organization? Now, because I'm an experimenter, I also want to conduct some experiments on you. So I am interested, by a raise of hands, also just a bit of a proof of life, which of these 4 would you feel most comfortable asking in a conversation? How many folks like A? Question A. Anybody for question B? All right. How about question C? Okay, and anyone for question D, finally? One of the things to notice is that there wasn't a magic question. Notice how different questions felt more comfortable to different people. The goal is to get you to have these conversations. So whatever is most comfortable for you, use it. What is always the same is that 3-part process. What about their philanthropy people connections? Let's see how many folks like these. A, did your parents or other family members support any charitable causes? B, can you tell me a bit more about who taught you to be generous or where your generous spirit comes from? C, when you were young, was there anyone whom you considered a role model for giving? Or D, who are your philanthropic role models? I'll have you vote again. How many folks like A in that list? Anyone for B in that list? Oh, that's a favorite. How about C? Okay. Anybody for D? All right. Thanks so much. By the way, I don't know if this sounds familiar or not, but this is a lot like what Paul is writing when he is going to motivate Timothy to accept the challenge. He starts with that family connection background in 2 Timothy 1:5. Let's look at some other examples. Is your giving decision is your giving your decision, or do you decide together with someone else? What is their connection to the cause? Do you have a favorite doctor or staff person at the hospital? Do you know any of our leaders, board committee members, staff, volunteers, or other supporters? What about their values? We elicit that with their giving motivations. Broadly speaking, what is your rationale for charitable giving? What inspired you to create your donor-advised fund or family foundation? How does your giving reflect your values, your feelings, and your aspirations? Maybe we can elicit values by asking about the causes supported. Tell me about a few other causes you support. Why do you support them? Would you mind telling me about the causes that are most important to you? Do you typically give to the same nonprofits each year? Why do you support them? Where else do you give and why? Where does this organization fit in your overall philanthropic priorities? Where does our charity fall on your list of charitable priorities? Now, some of you might be taking the idea of, oh, I don't ever want to ask a question about other organizations. I'm there to talk about my organization. No, you're there to help the donor to have the most joyful giving experience possible. And when you learn a little bit more about what moves their heart, where their honorable, noble, good characteristics are, you're an expert on your organization. And you can always be thinking about, they really like this. They probably don't know about this particular thing we're doing at our organization. I need to get them involved so that they start having those kinds of experiences. We can start building that connection and ultimately leading to perhaps a major life investment gift. Some other ways to elicit values. What do you think are the most important factors to donors who make a major gift to our organization? What's the single most important reason that you believe someone would support this project? Or how can we make giving to this organization more compelling for other donors? Or we could just be open about it. We don't have to be specific about which kind of connection we're asking about. We can just say, hey, do you mind if I ask, what is your connection to our mission or our organization? How could we connect with you better? How would you like to be more involved? Is there any area within the organization you could see yourself becoming more involved? Or we can ask the why question. So why do you give to this organization? Why do you support us? What's motivated you to be such a consistent supporter of this organization? Why have you been such a loyal donor? Why have you been so loyal? Why does what we do interest you? Why do you serve on X committee? Why does this cause matter to you? What's the key thing that persuaded you to join our cause? Why do you care so much that you would sacrifice your time and invest your dollars to move this mission forward? When you think about programs such as ours, what motivates you to support them? I understand you haven't supported our cause significantly in the past. Tell me about that. Or of all the charities you could support, why do you support us? Now, the reason, again, that we're trying to elicit this is we want to uncover, as a ministry role, what are those positive characteristics, those good, honorable, noble characteristics of the donor that we can then connect with what would be their most joyful gift that is going to be a true expression of that underlying character. By the way, I've used several why questions here. You might want to rephrase that because sometimes why or why did you do that can sound like an attack. So maybe something substitute like, well, what led you to can be more comfortable. All right, so I'm curious. We've looked at 5 different categories of questions, and I'm going to ask you to vote as we look through these, which would be your favorite type of question to connect with, to elicit the donor's people or values identity connections with the challenge. We've got the first group, the cause or charity people connections. The second is the philanthropy people connections. The third is the values underlying giving motivations. The fourth is values underlying the causes supported. And the fifth is values attributed to others. Usually, these are too small for people to read. Not going to be too small today. This thing is enormous. I love this. I want to bring this back to my university. How many folks would prefer to ask questions that are in category A? Okay. Anyone for category B? Thanks. Anyone for category C? Oh, C, we like C. Okay. How about category D? Okay. Anyone for category E? Okay, great. That's the researcher thing to do. I'm going to hop through this. If we had an extra 2 hours, we'd construct our own questions. I'd have you work with the person next to you, go through this process. Not going to do that because I got 26 minutes left, and we won't do that. Keep in mind, what's the point? Does this process lead to major life investment gifts? Yes, it does. But the real point is to create joyful giving from the heart. This process leads to the most enjoyable giving that accurately reflects the positive aspects of their heart. That's the ministry process. We can also make those identity connections by eliciting their life history connections. with either the organization or the cause or generosity in general. For example, when did you first get interested in this cause? Would you mind telling me how you became connected to the organization? How did you first find out about us? What first brought your attention to our organization? Or we can talk about their cause origin story. How did you first get involved with the organization? How did you get connected to this organization? Can you tell me what brought you to this charity in the first place? How did you get or come to be involved with our organization? How did you decide to first start supporting ABC Charity? What first made you interested in supporting this hospital? What got you started as a donor to the organization? What led you to make your first gift to the organization? Or we can get a little bit more broad. We can ask about their philanthropy origin story. Where did you learn to give? How did you learn to be so generous? What is your first memory of an act of generosity? What is your first memory of when you knew it was important to give back and help those people or organizations in need? We can also, some ministries, if it's a school or camp, we can ask about that origin story. What are your best memories of your time at the organization? What experiences were most meaningful to you during your time as a student? What were your favorite moments as a student? What's your favorite place on campus? What was the best thing about your experience at our school? Did you participate in any activities while a student? Tell me about your favorite faculty member, trying to elicit the life history connections to the organization. Tell me about your journey since you graduated from the university. In a healthcare cause, tell me about your journey since you were first diagnosed. Tell me about your journey since you first became involved in this cause. We can also ask about the life history review. How has this cause or organization been important in your life? Or tell me your ABC Charity story, whatever the organization is. How has this cause or charity impacted your life? How has the organization's work affected you personally? We can also ask about kind of a life history review question like, what have been your past experiences with the organization? If you were to tell others about your care at this hospital, how would you describe it? What have been your most positive experiences at the charity, and what is the most meaningful experience you had through your involvement? Okay, so we've looked at 4 different kinds of questions there, and again, interested in what your favorite is. We've got the cause or charity origin story, how you first got connected with the cause or charity. The philanthropy origin story, how did you learn to be generous? The post-origin story journey, tell me about your journey since you first became involved in the cause, or the life history review question, how has this cause or organization been important in your life? So one more vote. How many folks prefer the first category, the cause or charity origin story? Great. Anyone prefer the philanthropy origin story? Yeah, kind of a ministry feel to that. The post-origin story journey? Okay, may depend upon your organization. And finally, the cause or charity life history review. Several people like that. Again, as you look around at this, notice this isn't about finding everybody needs to say the exact same question. No, it's finding how you do ministry when you are connecting in a way that is comfortable for you. And here's the third step. And when it comes to major life investment gifts, it is perhaps the most important step, and that is to define a personally meaningful victory. What does that mean? It means we want to know what good works will bring the most enjoyment to the donor. Going back to the passage, the purpose that God richly blessed them with this wealth was for enjoyment. How do they enjoy it? By using it to do good work. So what good works will bring this particular donor the most enjoyment? We can go global with the questions. Hey, what changes do you believe would make the world a better place? If you could change the world, what would you do? How would you like to make a difference in this community or in this world? What would you like to pass on to future generations? As you look out to the future, what is the legacy you would like to leave? What positive difference do you want to make? Do you have any lifetime charitable goals? Tell me about those. Or if there were no restrictions on you, what would you like to do philanthropically? In the best of all possible worlds, what would you do to support our organization? If you could do anything for this organization, if the sky was the limit, what would that look like to you? Or if money were no object, what would you like to see happen with our program? We're helping the donor to define that personally meaningful victory that reflects their particular good character or values. If money were no object, what would we be doing now that we're not now doing? If money were no object, what kind of an impact would you like your giving to have? What would be your dream gift? Now, one of the things that I want to point out here, that as we are eliciting these things, the goal is to understand the donor's heart, okay? If the donor comes and says, I don't want to ask this question because they might describe some project that we just can't do or that we're not going to do for them. No. That's not what we're doing here. We want to understand the donor's heart. And when they describe something, and it might be something completely crazy that your organization is never going to do, we still want that information because as a ministry, it helps us to understand what they care about. Where is their heart? And even though we can't do this crazy thing that they talked about doing, we learn about what's important in their heart. And since we're the expert on our organizations, we'll start to see those connections where that particular good character trait can really connect in with something that the organization is doing. Some other examples. What change do you want to see because of your giving? What do you want to achieve with your charitable donations? What do you hope to achieve with your philanthropy? What would you ultimately like to accomplish with your philanthropy at our charity? What are your goals for your donor-advised fund or family foundation? How long do you want it to last? What are you trying to accomplish with your philanthropy, and how might we help? Notice that phrase. Is this coming alongside the donor with this authorized message and helping them? Absolutely. As you think about making a difference with your philanthropy, what appeals to you most? What kind of an impact would you like to have on this cause or with these beneficiaries? What are your goals for this gift? What kind of an impact do you want to make with your gift? What kind of an impact would you like this scholarship or an endowment to have? Have you thought about how you would like your planned bequest gift to be used? Again, all of these things is we want to move beyond the small pat on the head gift. The small gift message is, oh, you people are doing good things, and so here's a pat on the head gift. No. We want the major life investment gift. We want the major wealth sharing gift. So we want to elicit what is it that would motivate this donor to make this major life investment gift. We can define a giving victory with a single gift. A year from now, how would you know that you made a wise move with your philanthropic investment with us? If you were going to make a significant investment in the organization, a gift in the $1 million range, what would you like to accomplish with that gift? Why do you think this project is important to the community? We can define an organizational change victory. If you could change anything to better this organization, what would it be? Or you've been such a loyal member of the ABC Charity family and have supported ABC Charity's mission for so many years. What are your dreams for where you'd like to see ABC Charity go in the future? What are your long-term hopes for our charity and its mission? If you had the ability to enhance or expand ABC Charity's mission in a specific way, what would it be? What could we do to be more effective in the future? We can also look at questions like, where do you think we could improve our services or our programs? Are there any thoughts you'd like for me to take back to share with our CEO, president, or executive director? What are the most critical results you expect our organization to produce? Or what could we do better in your opinion? Again, trying to elicit what is that personally meaningful victory to them? What does it look like? What are those underlying character elements that drive it? If you could change anything about this organization or this issue or this project, what would it be? If there was one thing you could change about our organization today, what would it be? We can even just ask about their organizational interests. What were your impressions of the tour? What intrigued you most? Is there a particular program, project, or area of outreach that interests you most? If you were to make a significant commitment, is there a particular area you would want to gift your gift to support? If I can find a way, what at our nonprofit would you most like to support financially? And then other examples, looking at interest, what areas of the organization are you most interested in? What interests you personally about the problem we're addressing? What excites you most about the organization's work in the world? We can also look at the strength side of things. What do you think we do best? What do you think is the best thing about what our nonprofit does? What contributions to the community does the organization make that are important to you? Defining a personally meaningful victory. What's the most exciting thing you've heard about our institution recently? What do you think about this opportunity, talking about a gift option? What is most compelling to you about the project? Could you ever see yourself being involved in a project like this? What were your impressions of the event? So again, I've blown through lots of different questions there, all trying to do the same thing. What is the most personally meaningful victory for this particular donor? Which of these types of questions help to define their enjoyable good works, their most enjoyable gift? Which ones do you tend to like? And you can vote for more than one on these, is fine. How many folks like the global victory? If you could change the world, what would you do? Okay. How many like the legacy gift victory? Pass on to future generations. Yeah, a lot of folks like that. The no limits victory. If money were no object, it's one of my favorite ones. The overall victory. What change would you like to see? Okay, like that. The single gift victory. What are your goals for this gift? Okay. The organizational change victory. If you could change anything to better this organization, what would it be? Okay. The organizational interest. If you were to make a significant commitment, is there a particular area you'd want your gift to support? All right, thanks for that. Appreciate that. Now again, what's the point? Does this process lead to major gifts? Yes, it does. That is not the point. The real point is to create joyful giving from the heart. What gift experience, gift opportunity is going to reflect and grow the positive aspects of this donor's heart? Why? Because that's the process that leads to the most enjoyable giving that accurately reflects the positive aspects of the heart. A few other examples, we can define victory with gift implications and specifically with joy. Does your philanthropy give you joy? What philanthropic gift has given you the greatest joy? Tell me about that. What part of philanthropy gives you the most joy? What gift did you make that has brought you the most joy, and why? Or we can define the victory with past meaningful giving. Tell me about some meaningful gifts that you have made. How do you know when you've made a good gift? Share a couple of examples of good gifts with me. Why did you feel they were good? What means the most to you personally about what ABC Charity does? When you look at all your giving, be it your time or money, what captures your heart and your attention? What if we can talk about the implications of what the victory would do? What if this goal was accomplished? What would that mean to you? For a particular cause, here's an example. What would it mean for you to make a personal impact in saving or extending the lives of women living with breast cancer? Or what would it mean for you and your family to have an enduring impact in improving cancer therapies while assuring your own family's future? Or what makes giving a rewarding experience? We could also use a menu of different options. Which of these projects would be most meaningful or important to you? Or if you had to choose between making a gift towards the new building, the scholarship fund, or the endowment, which would you select? Tell me about why. If you could have your family's name on something like a building, scholarship, lectureship, what would be the most meaningful to you? Or if you had the money to fully fund any one aspect of the project, what would it be? And then finally, the overall victory, the passion question. What would you like to accomplish with your money that would be meaningful to you? A lot of variations of this one. What would you want to do or like to accomplish with your money or your giving or your philanthropy in this cause or at this organization that would be meaningful to you? So those are all the examples of how we go through that three-step process. What's next? Well, after the opening, we want to have follow-up questions. You see, it's not about this magic question. It's more about the follow-up. We can be open-ended. Would you tell me more about that? How do you mean? How so? How did you feel when that happened? Or what happened next? Really? Tell me more. What else? What led you to do that? Can you give me an example of that? Tell me more about blank. What happened after you blank? What's an example of blank? How does blank fit into the picture? Now we're using reflective questions where we actually are listening and reflecting back part of their story. Now, as we're going through this conversation, we ultimately want to get to kind of a reflective summary and confirmation question. Now, we are not trying to summarize the whole conversation we just had. We are trying to summarize and confirm with them their identity connections or victory connections with that particular challenge that we might be thinking about. So we're going to summarize and confirm the donor's connections to our cause or a particular project or to the organization. So again, we use a reflective transition. So what you're saying is, it feels like it sounds to me like, so what you're thinking about, and then we make that reflective statement where we summarize, highlight, or we're going to repeat key statements that support that connection. That's the journey we want to help them go on. So it is that connection we're trying to get them to confirm, and then we ask for the confirmation. Do I have that right? Is that it? Is that right? Is that what happened? Does that sound right? And as we are going through this conversation, we're the expert, and we can start spotting solutions. We've been listening. We've been identifying connections. We've been confirming those connections. Now, we match these with either donor experiences to increase that connection or ultimately with gift options. So be thinking about, as we're going through this constant cycle, eliciting these answers, what experiences would strengthen those connections? Oh, this is somebody, he or she really cares about this kind of making this kind of an impact. And the family connection, this is why they got connected with the ministry. What experiences would strengthen those connections? Are there particular programs, areas, or projects that match? What employees, beneficiaries, or other donors should they meet? What peers should be present at a solicitation? Are there giving instruments that match? Maybe scholarships, endowments, virtual endowments, charitable trusts, memorial gifts, estate gifts, other instruments. We are the expert, always thinking, what is the most joyful gift that this donor could make? You know what happens when you construct those things? They want to do it again. They find out that this is the most fun you can have with your wealth. They experience a gift where the giving experience, honestly, is worth the gift. Ultimately, we need to ask for the next step. So what does that sound like? Well, maybe just more involvement. Can I set a time so I could show you one of our facilities? Do you have time for a tour in the next couple of weeks? Would you be interested in attending this event? Or I think you'd be a fantastic addition to our board committee group. What are your thoughts on that? Ultimately, though, we're coming alongside to deliver that authorized message, which means the challenge, what we call making the ask. How do we do that? Number one, we ask for permission to ask. Number two, we make the ask. First, we ask for permission to ask. This is not a drive-by asking. This is not a knee-jerk reaction because we're not in the process of asking for a small gift. We're asking for a major life investment gift. And so this isn't going to be a surprise ask, but we're going to ask permission to share some options. We're using value words. Would you be open to exploring ideas to blank? Or would you be interested to hear more about how you could blank? Or would you like to hear about some possible ways to? And of course, here we're inserting what they want to accomplish with their philanthropy. We would like to show you some ways that you could blank. Would you be open to hearing some of these ideas? Or my job is to put together personalized options for you to consider. Would you mind if we set a time to look over some of those ideas together? Or what if it was possible to make a gift and still address these financial objections? Would you like to hear about these options? If we could show you a way to blank, would that be of interest? Or there are simple ways to blank. Would you like to know more about those? Or can I tell you about a gift option that would blank? Again, notice we're asking for permission to ask. And one way to do that is to set a social norm with a social norm statement. Others in your situation have blank. Would you like to hear more about how that works? Or you remind me of another donor. Do you mind if I share her story? She was able to blank. Is that something that might be useful for you? Or some of the people I meet with are interested in hearing about ways to blank. Is that something that might interest you? Or this one, Others who share your feelings have established perpetual funds. Here is a way of giving back to dear old state. Would you like to hear more about setting up such a fund, perhaps in honor or memory of a beloved family member? Now let's talk a bit about the actual ask meeting itself. This three-step process, three-word process, you can do as part of the final ask. The fundraising ask shouldn't just be a naked challenge. It should be part of the full story cycle. How do we get there? Well, even before the ask, we can review, we can describe and confirm the donor's identity connections. How does their identity connect to the challenge? How is that victory that their gift is going to accomplish, how is that personally meaningful to them because it connects back with their identity? Now, we're going to connect the challenge with that promised victory. It could use a formal proposal document. That's why is the project needed? Why now? How exactly will this work? What's it going to cost? This is how that challenge promises the victory. So what I want to suggest to you in very practical terms is you can ask for that major life investment gift by making the story cycle ask. That means for each one of these three connections, you have a single sentence. I'm going to give you some examples of that. Sentence number one is going to connect their identity to the challenge. You have, and then you describe the connection with the donor's identity. Sentence number two is going to connect the promised victory back with their identity. You understand, and then you describe how that victory is going to be personally meaningful to the donor. And then sentence number three is how that challenge promises the victory. Would you consider a gift of blank dollars to, and then you're going to describe the promised victory. Of course, the fourth step, you all are fundraisers, right? You know the fourth step is to shut up, right? Have some silence there. What does this sound like in practice? Let's get some examples for all different kinds of nonprofits. Sentence number one. You have been a friend of this library for over 20 years. Sentence number two. You understand how a new regional history collection would preserve our shared heritage. Sentence number three. Would you consider a gift of $50,000 to lead the campaign to make this a reality? Notice how in three sentences I've gotten all three story connections in that ask. Here's another example. Sentence number one, connecting their identity to the challenge. You have done so much to improve care for others since your own diagnosis with breast cancer. Sentence number two, showing how the victory would be personally meaningful. You understand how lives could be changed by offering free early screening. Sentence number three, would you consider a gift of $100,000 to help fund next year's screening clinics? Here's another example. You have always had such a heart for supporting the arts in this community. Sentence number two, you understand how this new exhibition could make a real impact for art lovers and the whole city. Sentence number three, would you consider a gift of $50,000 as our lead campaign donor to make this happen? One more example. You have been such a loyal alumnus to this department since you graduated years ago. Sentence two, you understand how important scholarships are in giving students the chance for an education. Sentence number three, would you consider a gift of $100,000 to fund a permanent named scholarship to help others like you become proud alums in the future? One of the things I want you to notice about these asks, this is the first one that I gave you where they were entirely funding the project. Notice in that victory that's being created on all of the others, $50,000 as our lead campaign donor to make this happen, or a gift of $100,000 to help fund next year's screening clinics, or to lead the campaign to make this a reality. So I don't have to fund the entire project, but we do need to create that kind of a visual victory impact that their gift has the promise of leading to that victory. And here's the cool thing about these kinds of asks. They're kind of foolproof. Because if you're making the story cycle ask, well, you can't make a story cycle ask without knowing the donor's story. You see, if you don't know how the donor's story or values connect to the challenge you're about to make, you can't make that first connection. If the ask that you're making is just an ask for money, it's not an ask for the donor to do something, to accomplish something, to buy specific work, well, if it doesn't promise a specific impact, you can't do step 3. And if you don't know why that gift's impact would be meaningful for the donor, you can't do that second step 2 connection. The point is that it's foolproof because if you're thinking about making the ask and you can't make a story cycle ask, you're not ready to make the ask. We haven't done that background to elicit those connections so that we know what is going to be the most joyful ask for this donor. The conclusion is this. There may not be one magic question. Use whatever works for you, but there is a magic story. We go through that donor's identity, challenge, victory journey. This is the same sequence that we see in the passage. We start with their original identity from their people, values, life story. We have a challenge. The challenge is enjoy your wealth. Don't bury it and die with it. There's a victory. I don't ask people for money. I ask people to do things that cost money. And then the enhanced identity, the new you. It comes back to these 3 words. And we've done all of these things. The only thing we haven't done is talked about the donor's wealth. And after a short break, we're going to come back and talk about how do we talk about the donor's wealth. So I'll go ahead and stop it there and hope some of that has been of interest to you. Thank you so much.